You've got exactly 20 days left, and if you don't respond to that letter sitting in your mailbox right now, your SNAP benefits could vanish in December. This isn't a scam email or a rumor. This is a mandatory recertification notice that the USDA is sending to millions of households across America, and the deadline is November 30th, 2024. Here's what nobody's telling you. Federal and state agencies are tightening eligibility requirements, and they're not making exceptions for late responses anymore. If you're one of the 42 million Americans who depend on food assistance, especially seniors on fixed incomes who also receive Social Security, you need to understand exactly what's happening. The letter asks you to verify your income, household size, and expenses. But here's the critical part. Many seniors are getting denied because they're not reporting their information correctly, or they're missing crucial documentation. Social Security benefits count as income, and how you report them can make or break your eligibility. Today, I'm walking you through exactly what that letter says, what documents you actually need, and the 3 biggest mistakes that are causing automatic denials, so you can protect your benefits before it's too late. Let me tell you something that's happening right now in living rooms across America. And it's causing panic for millions of families who thought their food assistance was secure. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, what most of us still call food stamps or SNAP benefits, is going through one of the most significant verification sweeps in recent history, and the timing couldn't be worse for seniors who are already struggling with inflation eating away at their Social Security checks. What's happening is that state agencies administering SNAP benefits are required by federal law to recertify every household's eligibility at least once every 12 months. And right now, we're in the middle of a massive recertification cycle that's affecting roughly 15 million households nationwide. The letter you received isn't just a formality or something you can deal with later when you have more time. It's a legal requirement, and if you don't respond by the deadline printed on that notice, your state has no choice but to terminate your benefits automatically. And here's the really frustrating part. Once they terminate your benefits, you can't just call them up and say you forgot. You'll have to reapply from scratch, which means going through the entire application process again, gathering all your documents again, and worst of all, waiting anywhere from 30 to 45 days before you see any benefits, if you even get approved the second time around. Now, I want to talk about why this is hitting seniors particularly hard, because there's a connection here that a lot of people aren't making between Social Security and SNAP eligibility. If you're receiving Social Security retirement benefits, Social Security disability insurance, or supplemental security income, you need to understand that these payments count as household income when your state calculates your SNAP eligibility. The confusion comes in because many seniors were told years ago when they first applied that their Social Security wouldn't affect their food stamps. But that's not exactly true, and the rules have gotten stricter over the past few years. What actually happens is this. Your state takes your gross monthly Social Security payment and they compare it against the federal poverty guidelines for your household size. For 2024, if you're a single-person household, the poverty line is set at about $14,000 per year, or roughly $1,200 per month. If you're bringing in more than 130% of that poverty line in most states, you won't qualify for SNAP at all, unless you meet certain deductions that bring your net income down below the threshold. This is where it gets complicated, and this is where thousands of seniors are losing their benefits, even though they technically should still qualify. The deductions are the secret that nobody explains clearly when you're filling out these recertification forms. You're allowed to deduct certain expenses from your gross income before the state calculates whether you qualify, and these deductions can make a massive difference between getting approved or denied. First, there's a standard deduction that everyone gets, which is about $193 per month for most households. Then there's an earned income deduction, but that only applies if you're still working, which most retirees aren't. But here's the big one that seniors need to pay attention to, the medical expense deduction. If you're 60 or older, Or if you're disabled, you can deduct out-of-pocket medical expenses that exceed $35 per month, and this includes things like prescription medications, doctor copays, dental work, eyeglasses, hearing aids, medical equipment, and even transportation costs to medical appointments if you can document them. A lot of seniors don't realize they can claim these deductions, or they don't keep good enough records to prove what they're spending, and that's costing them their food assistance. Then there's the shelter deduction, which covers your rent or mortgage payment, property taxes, homeowners insurance, and utilities. If your shelter costs exceed half of your income, after all other deductions, you can claim an excess shelter deduction up to a certain cap, and this can significantly lower your countable income for SNAP purposes. Let me give you a real example so you can see how this works in practice. Let's say you're a 72-year-old widow living alone, and you receive $1,500 per month in Social Security retirement benefits. On paper, that puts you over the income limit for SNAP, because 130% of the poverty line for a single person is about $1,160, so you're cutting it close. But let's say you spend $300 per month on prescription medications and doctor visits, your rent is $800 per month, and your utilities run about $150. When you apply those deductions correctly, your countable income drops dramatically. You start with your $1,500, subtract the standard deduction of $193, subtract your medical expenses over $35, which is $265, and then you calculate your excess shelter costs. Your total shelter expenses are $950, and half of your remaining income after the other deductions is about $521, so your excess shelter deduction is $429. When you subtract all of these legitimate deductions from your gross income, your net countable income might be as low as $600 per month, which would qualify you for a substantial SNAP benefit, possibly $250 or more per month. But if you don't know to claim these deductions, or if you don't provide documentation for them, the state just looks at your $1,500 Social Security check and denies your application. This is exactly what's happening to hundreds of thousands of seniors right now during this recertification period. They're getting these letters, they're filling out the basic information about their Social Security income, but they're not providing the detailed expense information that would actually qualify them for benefits. And then they're getting denial notices 30 days later, and they don't understand why. The state agencies are not going out of their way to help you claim every deduction you're entitled to. They're processing thousands of these applications every single day, and if you don't provide the information they need in the format they require, they're just going to process your application based on what you gave them, and that usually results in a denial or a reduction in benefits. This is why that letter you received is so critical, and this is why you cannot afford to ignore it or put it off until the last minute. The letter should tell you exactly what information you need to provide and what documents you need to send in. But I'm going to walk you through what they're typically asking for because the language in these notices can be confusing and bureaucratic. First, they want verification of your identity and your living situation. This usually means providing a copy of your driver's license or state ID and something that proves your current address like a utility bill or a lease agreement. If you've moved since you last recertified, this is absolutely critical because your benefits are tied to your state of residence and even your county. And if the agency thinks you've moved out of state, they'll terminate your benefits immediately. Second, they want proof of all income sources for everyone in your household. For most seniors, this means providing documentation of your Social Security benefits, and the easiest way to do this is to log into your My Social Security account online and download your benefit verification letter. Or you can call Social Security at 1-800-77-21213 and request they mail you a copy, although that can take a couple of weeks. If you receive any pension income, investment income, rental income, or if anyone else in your household works, you need to document all of that as well. Third, and this is the part that trips people up, they want documentation of your expenses, especially your medical expenses and your shelter costs. For medical expenses, you need to gather receipts, explanation of benefit statements from your insurance company, pharmacy printouts showing what you paid out of pocket, and if you're paying Medicare premiums that come out of your Social Security check, you need to document those as well because those count as medical expenses. For shelter expenses, you need to provide a copy of your lease or mortgage statement, proof of property taxes if you own your home, homeowners or renters insurance statements, and utility bills. Some states want to see bills for all your utilities individually, while other states use a standard utility allowance, so you need to read your notice carefully to see what your specific state requires. Now, here's something really important that catches a lot of people off guard. If you're living with family members or if you have a complicated living situation, you need to be very clear about your household composition because SNAP defines a household differently than you might think. Generally speaking, if you purchase and prepare food separately from the other people you live with, you can be considered a separate household for SNAP purposes. But if you share food expenses and eat meals together, everyone in the home has to be included in your SNAP household and all of their income counts too. This is particularly important for seniors who moved in with their adult children. If you're sharing meals and grocery expenses with your kids, their income counts against your SNAP eligibility, and that might disqualify you entirely even though your own Social Security is modest. But if you maintain separate groceries and prepare your own meals separately, you can be treated as a separate household of one, and only your income counts. The deadline on your notice is not negotiable, and I cannot stress this enough because I've heard from so many people who thought they could get an extension or who thought the agency would work with them if they were a few days late, and that's just not how this works. If your deadline is November 30th and you mail your documents on December 1st, your case will be closed and you're going to have to start over with a brand new application. If you're worried that you can't get all your documents together in time, here's what you need to do immediately. Call your local SNAP office. The phone number should be on the letter you received, and tell them you received your recertification notice and you're working on gathering your documents, but you want to confirm exactly what they need from you. Ask them specifically about medical expense deductions and shelter deductions, because sometimes you can verify these expenses over the phone or through their computer system if you've reported them before. If you absolutely cannot get all your documents by the deadline, submit what you have with a cover letter explaining what's missing and when you'll be able to provide it. Sometimes the agency can put your case in pending status for a short period while you gather additional documentation, but that's entirely at their discretion, and you should not count on it. Another issue that's coming up frequently right now is that some states are combining SNAP recertification with Medicaid recertification, especially for seniors who receive both benefits. And this is creating massive confusion because the income limits and rules for Medicaid are different from SNAP, and people are getting mixed messages about their eligibility. You might be over income for SNAP, but still qualify for Medicaid, or vice versa. And you need to understand that these are separate programs with separate applications, even if your state is processing them at the same time. If your SNAP benefits get terminated but you still need help affording food, there are other options you should know about. Many seniors qualify for additional nutrition programs specifically designed for older Americans. The Commodity Supplemental Food Program provides boxes of nutritious food to low-income seniors age 60 and older, and the income limits are often more generous than SNAP. Senior nutrition programs run by your local area agency on aging may offer congregate meals at senior centers or home-delivered meals if you're homebound, and these programs often have no cost or operate on a sliding fee scale based on your income. Let me address something else that's causing confusion, and frankly, some legitimate anger among seniors who are going through this recertification process. Many people are asking why they have to keep proving their eligibility every year when their situation hasn't changed. If you've been receiving the same Social Security payment for years and you live in the same apartment and your rent hasn't changed, why does the government need you to verify all this information again? The answer is complicated, and it involves federal law, state regulations, and honestly, a fair amount of bureaucracy that doesn't always make practical sense. Federal law requires states to verify SNAP eligibility at least annually to prevent fraud and to ensure that benefits are going to people who truly need them. The problem is that this one-size-fits-all approach doesn't account for seniors on fixed incomes whose situations really don't change much from year to year. Some states have started implementing longer certification periods for elderly and disabled households, sometimes up to 24 or even 36 months. But this varies by state, and you have to ask about it specifically. The recertification requirement also exists because your financial situation could change in ways that affect your eligibility. Maybe you sold your house and now you have money in the bank, or maybe you started receiving a pension, or maybe your adult child moved in with you and now you have additional household income. The system assumes that these changes happen and that people won't necessarily report them voluntarily, so the annual recertification is designed to catch those changes. What makes this current situation particularly stressful is that it's happening right before the holidays, which is when food costs are highest and when seniors are already feeling financial pressure from wanting to spend time with family or perhaps buy small gifts for grandchildren. Losing your SNAP benefits in December means going through Christmas and New Year without that assistance. And for someone living on a fixed income, that $200 or $300 in monthly food assistance can be the difference between eating properly and having to skip meals or rely on cheap, unhealthy food that doesn't provide adequate nutrition. This is also happening at a time when Social Security recipients just found out what their cost of living adjustment will be for 2025. And while any increase is welcome, many seniors are finding that the COLA doesn't keep pace with their actual expenses, especially when it comes to food, housing, and medical costs. When you combine a modest Social Security increase with the potential loss of SNAP benefits, a lot of seniors are actually going to be worse off financially next year than they are right now, and that's creating real anxiety and hardship. If you're helping an elderly parent or relative deal with their recertification, please understand that this process can be overwhelming for someone who may not be comfortable with paperwork or who might have cognitive issues that make it difficult to organize documents and meet deadlines. Offer to help them gather their documents. Make copies of everything before you send it in, and consider taking them to the SNAP office in person if that's an option in your area. Because sometimes face-to-face communication can resolve issues faster than trying to do everything by mail or phone. You can also ask about appointing an authorized representative who can handle SNAP matters on behalf of your elderly relative if they're having trouble managing it themselves. This requires filling out some additional paperwork, but it can make the process much easier, especially if your relative has memory issues or difficulty understanding the requirements. Document everything you submit. Keep copies of all paperwork, and if you mail anything, send it certified mail with return receipts so you have proof that the agency received your documents before the deadline.